There are many things Turks and Greeks argue about. Whether Hagia Sophia is a mosque or a church, whether it's Istanbul or Constantinople, whether baklava is Turkish or Greek, but we Turks do it better, whether all these foods are Turkish or Greek, and the list goes on. But in the end, Turks and Greeks also share countless similarities and are actually quite alike. In this video, I want to talk about something quite fascinating, something that both Turks and Greeks have in common. I want to talk about Karamanlı Turkish. Karamanlı Turkish was a medieval Turkish dialect that was spoken by the Karamanlidis people in the Karaman region of what is now modern-day central Turkey. Unlike the Ottoman Turkish, which was written in the Arabic script for 6 centuries up until 1928, the Karamanlidis used the Greek script. Before we dig into Karamanlı Turkish further, let's talk a little more about the Karamanlidis people who spoke this Turkish dialect. The origin of the Karamanlidis is disputed, and there are 2 schools of thought about it. Greek historians claim that the Karamanlidis are the descendants of the old Byzantine Greeks that were Turkified, whereas Turkish historians claim that they are the descendants of the Christian Turkic soldiers who had served in the Byzantine army in the early 11th century. Upon reading through various sources on this topic, it was apparent to me that the Greek view on this is more widely accepted in the world. However, as the 20th century English historian Arnold Joseph Toynbee said, there was no definite answer to the question of the origin of the Karamanlidis. Ultimately, we can conclude that the Karamanlidis were most probably Byzantine Greeks who were linguistically Turkified after the Seljuk Turks arrived in Anatolia in 1071. For centuries, the Karamanlidis lived close to the world-renowned Cappadocia region. They were quite an interesting group of people and a unique blend of Greek and Turkish cultures. The Karamanlidis followed Greek Orthodoxy, but spoke only Turkish. As I dug into research on the Karamanlidis, I found some interesting accounts of them from the past centuries. An anonymous piece of writing from 1437 in Latin is perhaps the testimony that best describes the Karamanlidis. They were dressed in Muslim style and spoke Turkish. In churches, the language of liturgy was classic Greek, but the sermons were given in Turkish. In addition to this, there are many more accounts on the Karamanlidis people written by various people in history. The famous 17th century Ottoman traveler a.k.a. Çelebi's records say that the Karamanlidis were of Turkish origin, and their accent was no different than the local Muslim Turks. They printed their Bibles in Karamanlı Turkish and sang their hymns and prayers in Turkish as well. The German traveler Hans Dernschwam met the Karamanlidis in the 16th century. He described them as a Christian folk of Greek faith. The Ottoman Armenian historian Eremya Çelebi Kömürcüyan, who met the Karamanlidis in the 17th century, wrote that despite being Greek, they did not know Greek and spoke only Turkish. In the 19th century, English writer William Martin Leake, who traveled to the Konya province in central Turkey, wrote, the generality of the Karamanlidis is ignorant of their own language and use Turkish in the church service. It is an indisputable fact that, in a great part of Anatolia, even the public worship of the Greeks is now performed in the Turkish tongue. As opposed to many other small minority languages that were spoken in Anatolia in the past, Karamanlı Turkish was not only a spoken language, it had its own literary tradition. For example, the Cappadocian Greek dialect that was spoken by the local Greeks of Cappadocia has little to no written records, because it was a spoken language and was neither used in official documents nor for church affairs. Today, it is completely extinct in Turkey. However, although Karamanlı Turkish is also extinct in Turkey today, there are more than 500 pieces of literature to have been printed in this language in the past centuries. For example, if someone speaks Turkish and is able to read Greek, they can easily understand this 1853 version of the famous novel Robinson Crusoe in Karamanlı Turkish, or this Bible written in 1902 in Istanbul, or this newspaper from the late 19th century. In addition to all these pieces of literature in Karamanlı Turkish, you can find many remnants of this language across central Anatolia. There are still some ruins of the old houses that were owned by the Karamanlides people around the Cappadocia region. For example, this Karamanlı Turkish text written at the entrance of this old house translates to Mashallah, which means praise be in a religious context. Another inscription in Karamanlı Turkish can be found above the entrance to the Hagia Eleni Church in the Konya province of Turkey. This can perhaps be the most popular and symbolic inscription in Karamanlı Turkish in Turkey. There are also many cemeteries across Turkey where one can find several tombstones in Karamanlı Turkish. Generally, these inscriptions often talk about the lives of average Karamanlides citizens from the Ottoman Empire, such as craftsmen, merchants, villagers, and such. As the British historian Richard Clarke describes, these inscriptions offer a glimpse of a long past world of Greek and Turkish symbiosis. In 1923, just like the Cappadocian Greeks, the Karamanlides were also forced to relocate to mainland Greece due to the population exchange agreement between Turkey and Greece. Although the Turkish government tried to cut a deal for the Karamanlides to exempt them from this agreement, in the end it was decided that religion would be the main criteria for the exchange. The number of the deported Karamanlides is thought to be 100 to 400,000. But unlike the rest of the Greeks who were sent back to Greece, the Karamanlides did not speak any Greek. Their native language was Turkish. Although the Karamanlides were Orthodox, they faced a lot of discrimination upon settling in Greece, simply because they only spoke Turkish.
Δάσκαλε, άκου να σου πω. Αυτά που μας έκαναν αυτοί εδώ, περισσότερο το χωριό μας, χιλιόδεντρο, τσάκωνη, ήταν χειρότερα από τους Τούρκους.
Τι λες?
Να κατάλαβες. Πού τολμούσε το κοριτσάκι να πάει να πάρει νερό το βραδάκι. Ένα βιοτρόπον είχαμε, ντύναμε εγώ μόνο μας. Οι άντρες με τα όπλα μας κυνήγουσαν να μας πιάσουν. Εγώ στο σχολείο πήγαινα.
Karamanlı Turkish saw a severe decline in speakers, with the local Karamanlides leaving Anatolia. Although the spoken version has been preserved to some extent in Greece until today, there are no official records on the number of its speakers. But it is assumed that it must be a few hundreds, if not a few dozens, in Greece. In Turkey, however, Karamanlı Turkish has not been used for over a century. Despite being pretty much a dead language now, Karamanlı Turkish and the Karamanlides will always remain a unique and a fascinating blend of Greece and Turkey's shared history.
Babam Çukurlu, anam Daşlıklı.
Nece konuşuyordunuz siz aranızda?
Biz Rumca bilmiyorduk, Türkçe konuşuyorduk.
Anladım. Anan baban Rumca öğrendiler mi?
Hiç burada öğrendiler. Orada hiç bilmiyorlardı.
Orada hiç bilmiyorlardı.
Orada namazı da bilmiyorduk biz. Yattım sağıma, kalktım soluma diyorduk.
Babanın duasını söyle.